Welcome to the temple of Lucifer, light and mystery. Glory and praise to our Lord Lucifer and our father Satan. It is important to know about our father Satan and our Lord Lucifer. As Michael Aquino, a worshipper-follower of our Lord Father Satan and our Lord Lucifer, used to say, every successful era of human cultural and ethical development has produced its literary manifesto or an argument that challenges existing norms and proposes a novel approach to the constant problems of civilization. Not infrequently it has been the case that the realities of political nationalism have been blended with the idealism of extranational emphasis to produce what we cautiously refer to by the term existentialism. A list of pertinent works might include Plato's Republic, Aristotle's Politics, Machiavelli's The Prince, and the writings of Nietzsche, Hobbes, Locke, Marx, and Sartre. This is the book of our epoch. The dawn of the Satanic Age was celebrated on April 30, 1966 or Year 1. On that date, Anton Szandor LaVey consecrated the Church of Satan in the city of San Francisco and assumed the office of its first high priest. What had begun several years earlier as an intellectual forum dedicated to the research and application of the black arts has since expanded into an international philosophical movement of the first magnitude. Satanism, once the isolated province of Michael Aquinas, was part of the Church of Satan's administration from 1969 to 1975. This introduction appeared in the 1972 edition of the Satanic Bible. He split from the Church of Satan over ideological differences with Anton LaVey and formed his own organization, the Temple of Set, which today has several thousand members around the world. He is the author, among other books, of a voluminous tome on the history of the Church of Satan from 1966 to 1975. He currently enjoys a well-deserved pension as a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army. 15 of furtive exiles and radical eccentrics, it has become a serious alternative to the doctrines of theism and materialism. By promulgating indulgence rather than abstinence, Satanism rejects the notion that man's progress is conditioned by his acceptance of a self-imposed morality. Satanists hold that a judgment comes from the comparison and resolution of opposites, and one cannot flaunt righteousness by honoring a single parameter of behavior. An empirical approach to morality is not a recent innovation. Theorists such as Pythagoras, Hegel, Spencer, and Comte advanced the original proposition of man's intellectual independence of the natural order. And although this concept has invariably provoked adverse reactions from society, one need only review the spasmodic cataclysms of history to see how inadequately Homo sapiens cooperate with their fellow man. However, every tenor, by itself, is inconsequential. The advocates of a subjective morality were hitherto academy abstractionists and occasionally the scattered and disorganized devotees of traditional white witchcraft. In fact, these ultimates have enjoyed some notoriety lately, as their alleged proclamation of a liberal morality tempered by social correctness attracts a number of bored but timid dilettantes. Such aficionados of the occult profess a self-righteous horror of black magic or Satanism, which they denounce as an evil and degenerate creature of moral and carnal abuse. On the other hand, the Satanist regards traditional witchcraft simply as a neurotic reaction against the established religions of patriarchal culture. The worship of any deity or deities under any guise is repulsive to the black magician, who considers all professions of faith or reliance on a supernatural protective entity as humiliating demonstrations of cowardice and emotional insecurity. Satanism has often been misinterpreted as mere devil worship, when in fact it constitutes a clear rejection of all forms of worship as a desirable component of the personality. It is not so much an anti-religion or a simple rejection of any belief as a non-religion, an uncompromising refusal of all substantial mysticism. As such, it represents a far more serious threat to organized theologies than the archaic writings of the old demonologies can be. Ritual and fantasy play a very important role in the activities of the Satanic Church, working on the assumption that experience and control of metaphysical and mental irrationality are necessary for the strengthening of the psyche. In this way, an effort is made to avoid what perhaps constituted the Achilles heel of the Gurdjieff-Ouspensky school of subjective psychological evolution. The very first disciples of this self-determined transcendentalism postulated that all non-materialistic sensations were a danger to the student. A crucial element of Satanic ritual is the appreciation of its inspirational and illustrative qualities, without necessarily regarding it as an inflexible reality. Satanism is better identified as a disposition than as a religion, since it is actively concerned with all facets of human existence, and not only with the so-called spiritual aspects. However, those who proclaim that Satanism constitutes a danger to the system of justice and the cooperative order of society have totally overlooked the main idea. Satanism advocates unrestricted freedom, but only to the extent that one's own preferences do not violate those of others. It should be noted that Satanism is a philosophy of the individual, not of the masses. There are no collective political statements except Crowley's warning, the gravest of all sins is self-deception. While the majority of the population may be instinctively inclined to a de facto Satanism, they must be reminded that the approaches of Satanism are not for the feckless. There are no such things as satanic missionaries, and certain precise requirements must be met. Inexperience is not to be desired, but pretentiousness, hypocrisy, and pomposity are treated with the contempt they deserve. Satanism is no less art than science, and there is no deified yardstick. Dr. Levy is uniquely qualified to write the history of the new diabolism. An American of Gypsy, Romanian and German shepherd ancestry, from an early age he displayed the characteristic restlessness of his nomadic ancestors and showed unusual sympathy for their arcane and worldly tradition. His early preoccupation with the military sciences prompted him to read various World War II logistical publications, only to discover that the visions of military glory that characterized World War I had given way to mercenary and detached realism during the Second Conflagration. His experiences as a student did nothing to erase the taste of this early display of human cynicism, and Levy's growing impatience with the sterile regimentation of conventional education would lead him to seek out the strange surrealist charms of the circus. He assisted Clyde Beatty as a wild animal tamer and very soon developed a strong affinity for the big cats, which was to mark his personality in a rather curious way. All animated creatures are basically bestial, Levy reasoned, and the only thing that the most refined social orders achieve is, at best, a feeble suppression of this innate savagery. From the circus he would move on to the traveling fairs or carnavalia where the brilliance of the performing arts was tinged with the daily struggle for daily sustenance. Here Levy worked in a pathetic but dignified world, populated by rebels, freaks, yards, and human oddities, and he would learn the art of stage magic, whose success depends on the level of distraction he manages to induce in the attention of his audience. He would observe, not without a certain harshness, the fascination that the normal man seems to have for his deformed comrades, or gloating with satisfaction at seeing how misfortune is inflicted on his fellow man instead of trying it on himself. Becoming increasingly interested in this cruel and lycanthropic attribute of human nature, he decided to study criminology in college, and even went on to work as a photographer with the San Francisco Police Department. As a circus professional he had the opportunity to contemplate the carnal side of man in its most artistic facet. Now he would experience it in its most violent and savage aspect. 3 years of living day to day with the blood, brutality and abject misery that permeate the criminal subculture left him jaded, sick, disillusioned and filled with anger at the prevailing hypocrisy of polite society. To make a living, he took up pipe organ playing and devoted much of his efforts to what was to become his life's work, or black magic. Levy had long rejected stereotypical treatises on ceremonial sorcery as mere hysterical products of medieval imaginations. The old cult, with its superstitions, affected gestures, and childish parlor games are not for us. What we seek is a metaphysical psychology that appeals to the intellectual man only after having given its brutal and animal origins proper considerations. This is why our symbol is the goat of Mendez. Satan is by far the most enigmatic figure in literature. Possessing every conceivable wealth, and being the most powerful of the archangels, he disdainfully rejected his exalted allegiance to proclaim his independence from all that his heavenly chief represented. Though condemned to the most dreadful of domains, a hell absolutely shunned by divinity, he accepted such deprivations as the burden of his intellectual prerogative. In his infernal empire one may indulge with impunity in the most extraordinary pleasures, yet in the midst of such unbridled licentiousness, the devil has maintained a peculiar nobility. It was this elusive quality with which we chose to identify. This is the guiding principle of Satanism, that the ultimate consequence of man lies not in unity but in duality. Only synthesis decides values, adherence to a single order was arbitrary and therefore insignificant. The Satanic Bible is a most insidious document. One is strongly tempted to compare it to that dark and evil mythology that is The King in Yellow, a psychopolitical work that supposedly drove its readers to insanity and perdition. As candid and colloquial as it may seem at first glance, the Satanic Bible is not a volume that can be easily overlooked. It is very much a product of our time, not only because such a book on a par with its author would probably have been destroyed in an earlier epoch, but because its creation was an evolutionary inevitability. You reader, are about to be impaled on the sharp horns of a satanic dilemma. If you accept the tenets of this book, you will condemn your most precious sanctuaries to annihilation. In return you will awaken the fiercest of hells. If you reject its argument, you will resign yourself to a cancerous disintegration of your hitherto unconscious sense of identity. No wonder the legacy of the archenemy has lavished you with such bitter enemies. Whatever your decision, you can no longer put it off. The Satanic Bible finally articulates what man, instinctively, has always been afraid to proclaim, that he is, potentially, divine.